In 1953, South Korea was devastated by war and among the poorest countries on the earth. No oil, no land, no resources. Half of its cities were rebel. The average South Korean was poorer than the average Nigerian. Today, it runs the world's semiconductor, dominate global entertainment, and export a culture that the entire planet obsessed with. Same land, same people, and two generations, and an entirely different country. Here is why this matters to you specifically. The feeling that our circumstances define our future isn't unique. South Korea faced that question on a national scale after the Korean War. What happened next changed the history. Most people think South Korea's rise is about K-pop and Samsung, that it was lucky or American money or geography, that it cannot be replicated. That is the surface story. The real story is about a decision, a collective national and generational decision to refuse the identity that the world has assigned to them. That decision is what this video actually about. I have spent weeks inside this story, reading economists, historians, and government reports, and people who have lived through it. I'm going to give you the full picture, not the tourist version, the real one. Here is how we move through it. First, where South Korea actually started, because most people have no idea how bad it was. Then, the economic machine that they built and how it worked. Then the cultural exploration and how it was engineered, not accidental. Then the dark side, because there is always a dark side. Then the shadow of North that nobody factors in. And finally, what all of it means, not for South Korea, but for you. If this is the kind of video that make you think what is possible, subscribe before we go further. This channel exists for actually this. Now let us get into 1953, South Korea was rebel. Poorer than most of sub-Saharan Africa. GDP was lower than Ghana. No resources, no land, divided in half by a war that technically never ended. The country did not just lose, it was erased. Infrastructure gone, industries gone, an entire generation of men either died or broken. Nobody gave South Korea a chance. Not the economists, not the geopolitical analysts, not the aided organizations arrived with food and medicines. The general consensus was this country will need help for a very long time. 2 generations later, Samsung is inside every phone on earth. Hyundai ships car to every 200 countries. SK Hynix makes the chip that power artificial intelligence. South Korea went from being one of the largest recipient of foreign aid to one of the largest donor within a single lifetime. This is not growth, that is transformation at a scale and speed that has no real parallel in modern history. The miracle of the Han River is what they call it, named after the river that runs through Seoul. But miracle is the wrong word. Miracles happen to you. What South Korea did, they chose it. Deliberately, painfully, and at enormous cost. This is where the real story begins. South Korea has no resources, no oil, no gas, no minerals worth exporting, no geographical advantage, just a strip of land with mountains covering most of it. So they made one thing their resource: human capital. The government made a calculated decision. They identify a handful of companies with exporting potential and backed them aggressively. Capital, subsidies, protection from foreign competition, political support at the highest level. These companies were called chaebols. Samsung, Hyundai, SK, LG, Diavo. They became national army fighting economic wars, semiconductors, shipbuilding, electronics, steel, automobiles. South Korea entered industries that bigger, older, and more established nations are building over centuries and competed directly and won. By 1980s, South Korea exporting products that the world actually wanted. By 1990s, it was a developed economy. By 2000s, its companies were setting global standards. But here is what nobody tells you about the chaebol models. It was brutal. Corruption was built into it. Monopoly was built into it. Small businesses suffocated because the chaebol consumed everything. The founders of these companies, some of them went to prison. Some of their children went to prison. The inequality it created still scares the South Korean society today. The chaebol model was not clean. It was not fair, but it worked at a speed that nobody else could have matched. The tension between what it built and what it cost is the real story behind South Korea's economic miracle. Then in 1997, Asian financial crisis. South Korea is hit harder than almost anyone. The IMF comes in. Conditions are imposed. Companies collapse. Unemployment spikes. The humiliation is national. A country that spent 40 years building itself up watches its partially collapse in 18 months. The government sat down and asked a question that most government never ask. What else do we have? The answer was culture. South Korea expanded support for its cultural industries through funding, education, copyright reforms, and aggressive global promotion. Film schools, music production infrastructure, television investment, entertainment became a part of country's long-term economic strategy, not as a side project, as a pillar. What happened next, nobody fully predicted. BTS sold out stadiums in 87 countries. Parasite became the first non-English movie to win an Academy Award for Best Picture. Squid Game became the most watched show in Netflix history in every country simultaneously. Korean skincare rewrote global beauty standards. Glass skin now is a term used in New York, London, Lagos, and Mumbai. Korean food, barbecue, kimchi, tteokbokki, fried chicken is on menu everywhere. Korean culture did not slowly spread, it denoted. And here is what makes it remarkable. This is not organic. This is engineered. South Korea looked at soft power, the ability to influence the world through culture rather than military force, and decided to compete it in the same way they compete in shipbuilding and semiconductor. They turn culture into a powerful weapon of influence, more powerful than any military. And it worked beyond anything they imagined. Now I need to tell you what the brochure leaves out. The same intensity that built South Korea is now breaking South Koreans. Education pressure that start before the children can properly read, hagwons, private tutoring academies that run until midnight. Students only sleep for 4 hours to compete in university exams that will eventually determine their entire future. The suicide rates are highest among any developing world. Nobody talks about the mental health crisis South Korea is facing because of the culture of collective resilience. South Korea has the lowest birth rate on earth. Not low, the lowest ever recorded by any country in history. Young South Koreans are not having children. Many are not even dating. They have a name for their generation, sampo. It means giving up. The generation that give up on dating, on marriage, on children, because the system demand everything and give less and less. Housing in Seoul is so much unaffordable because of your relative income. The generation that did everything right, study hard, worked hard, competed, and still can't afford a life that they can feel it belongs to them. South Korea built an economic system so efficient that it started consuming its own people. And that is the question no economic miracle could ever fully answer. What is the point of building something so excellent if people that are building it is breaking? What does success mean on a national level if it is only producing exertion on an individual level? South Korea is not ignoring it. It is struggling with it in real time. But the answers are not coming fast enough. There is one more thing that you need to understand about South Korea that never makes into the conversation of K-pop and Samsung. 25 million people live 50 kilometers north from Seoul. Same language, same history, same food, same faces. Separated by a line drawn in 1953 by a couple of people sitting far away in a room. On one side, one of the most dynamic, creative, technologically most advanced societies on earth. On the other, one of the most isolated, controlled, and impoverished. Right now, as you watch this, artillery is pointed at Seoul, not metaphorically, literally. North Korea has so much conventional power pointed towards Seoul that if it would have to fire, it will cause so much catastrophic damage within minutes. South Korea built one of the most creative and vibrant economy on earth with a gun pointed at its head. That is not a background voice. That is the very conditions under which Samsung factories were built. Every K drama was filmed, every BTS album was recorded, every hagwons student stayed up midnight studying. The world is obsessed with South Korea's energy, with its style, its creativity, its speed. But that energy didn't gone despite the pressure. It emerged inside it, shaped by it, forced into a particular intensity by the constant awareness of alternative. The other version of Korea that exists just north of the border was always visible. Understanding South Korea without understanding the shadow is not really understanding South Korea at all. Small country, no oil, no land, no resources, constant existential threat, two generations from rebel to running the world. They turned limitation into focus, turned pressure into viscosity, turned culture into power, turned a package stamp of a land into a global powerhouse. But here is what I actually want you to take from this. South Korea is not a proof that success is guaranteed. It is a proof that identities can be fixed. A nation can reinvent itself. A person can reinvent themselves. The circumstances were real. The poverty was real. The war was real. The division was real. Nobody is pretending that those things did not happen. They matter so much. They eventually shape everything, but they did not become destiny. The same pressure that buried South Korea was the existential pressure that built South Korea. It was directed with purpose, instead, it absorbed in silence. History is full of people, places, and nations that expected the story to be written by them. Here, South Korea wrote a different one. South Korea had every reason to accept the story given to it by the world. Devastated, forgotten, divided, but it didn't. The same pressure that was supposed to bury them became an exact force to build it. You already know what pressure feels like. You live in it. And question this channel exists to keep asking is what happened when pressure is directed with purpose instead of absorbing in silence. If that question matters to you, you are on the right place. Subscribe because in next video we will go deeper.